What's the difference between a battery-powered right-angle impact wrench or a battery-powered ratchet? We'll find out in just a moment. I'm Tim Johnson. You're watching Shop Tool Reviews. Even though the battery-powered ratchet and the battery-powered impact wrench, or right-angle impact wrench in this case, install and remove fasteners, they actually do it a little differently, or in different manners, if you will. And in fact, if you've used one of each, then you can actually tell in operation that they react a little bit different and they feel a little bit different. Now, I'll just quit talking and we'll dive into this and actually see what makes these tick and how they work. Today's video, we're going to talk about what the difference is between a right-angle impact wrench and just a battery-powered ratchet, because many times I hear people ask about how much power do the battery-powered ratchets have, regardless of whose name is on it. And I really don't think that's that big of a deal. I'm looking for more speed in a ratchet rather than I am the ability for it to take off nuts and bolts. And with a right-angle impact wrench, that's where I'm looking for power, for that hitting power to actually remove those fasteners and then even tighten them as well. So let's take a little deeper look as to the difference here. First, let me just show you kind of in layman's obvious, if you will, operation. So here we have the M12 Milwaukee. This is a 3/8 drive. And you'll see when I pull the trigger here, you hear that little bit of clicking or that ratcheting sound, but that's all it's doing. It's not really impacting, even though a lot of times it may sound like that. It's not doing any hitting. It's just rotating and creating that ratcheting sound in there, which we'll show you inside of this real quick. But watch here on this socket. When I turn it, obviously that's turning, but I can stop that. And now it's just kind of jerking my hand back and forward, but it's not turning that socket, as you can see there on the head of the tool as well. Even wide open, I can pretty much stop that tool. I think this has got like 35 foot-pounds of force, so I can stop that just by holding that socket in my hand. Whereas on the Kobalt here, when I pull the trigger, you don't hear any impacting there because it's not activating that impact. But as I grab it, now we hear that hitting sound. And you see it's actually turning that socket in my hand. Now I can slow it way down and I can stop it. But if I use the variable speed trigger to give it a little bit more power, no matter how hard I hold it, I can overcome my grip on that. Now, I think we rated this was over 200 foot-pounds of force, so obviously I don't have that kind of grip in my hand. If I did, I'd be arm wrestling or something. Anyway, let's take these apart and actually take a closer look at these as well. First thing we'll do is remove these batteries. And so the Milwaukee here, it comes apart rather easily. Just a snap ring here. And then, yeah, so there's our ratcheting mechanism. And we'll also see the ratcheting head right here, which I'm not going to take that apart any further. And then let's take apart the Kobalt as well. Okay, now what we see here in the head, we see a gear, we see a ball bearing, but quite a bit different than, if you look at the Milwaukee ratchet here, when you take apart the head, it looks just a lot like a standard ratchet. The difference being the pawl, this is what you call right here that kind of grips the gear typically, the pawl, P-A-W-L, that flips back and forth depending on whether you're in forward or reverse by flipping the directional lever here. It's actually where the gear would typically be for the anvil. So the pawl is actually right here, And then the gear, which we typically see there, is actually in the surrounding of this head. So this part right here that you'll see move back and forth, that you'll see if I put the battery back in here and pull this, it's just activating like a cam motion. So all this is doing is spinning. There is no hitting, there's no hammer in there, and it's, as that cam motion is going around and around, it's grabbing this pawl and spinning the anvil here. So again, you've got no impacting mechanism on a battery-powered ratchet. It's just ratcheting. All you're hearing is that sound of it ratcheting, so all you get is the power of that motor. Whereas on a true right angle impact wrench, as you'll see here, I can pop this out. Now we'll see, number one, there's a bearing here that supports a little more force, and it goes in that head right there. And then if I actually get the anvil out of here, so here we have an actual hammering mechanism or impact mechanism. And what happens here, there's two little ball bearings deep inside this recession here, and then you have the anvil. And you see you have these dogs here that engage the anvil. So you see as the motor turns, it turns this mass, which by the way, this weighs a little bit, you know, I don't know if it's a half a pound or something like that. Maybe we'll weigh it here in just a moment. But as it rotates, you get that rotational mass, you get that inertia, and as it hits this, it tries to turn that anvil. Now, if it cannot turn that anvil, and it's overpowering, and that's when you hear it hit, 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 what it's doing is, once it hits a microsecond or so, or a few microseconds, then it engages this spring right here, or that force overcomes the spring and compresses that and lets this jump over this anvil. So once it hits there, it compresses that spring, it jumps over, and then slides back down and hits one more time, overcomes the spring, jumps over it again. And so that's that hammering sound you hear is this is rotating at 4, 5, 6, 800 RPMs. And as it comes around, it hits one more time, jumps over again from this spring compressing here. And from that spring compressing, it allows it to jump over that anvil there and go and strike it one more time. So there's the difference there in a true right angle impact wrench, where you have an impacting mechanism, and just your common battery-powered ratchet or cordless ratchet, if you will. Totally different types of tools, which, by the way, a lot of times I think people forget to maintain their ratchets, as well as even more so their battery-powered or their cordless ratchets. So this ratchet head needs to be serviced just like your typical ratchets. I know some guys take their typical ratchets, just soak them in old motor oil to keep them lubricated. That's fine. You could do that in this one too. You just don't want to get it too deep. Or you may want to take it apart, clean it out with some brake cleaner, and then re-grease it. On a ratchet, you want to keep a thinner fluid. Whether you're using like assembly lube for motors, that works really well. For rebuilding engines, that works well. Or if you want to take some light grease and put it in there. On the impact wrench, you want to do some more heavier grease to make sure that that's going to stay in there, because as you can see here, it does. I don't think there's an O-ring. No, there's no O-ring there. So typically you're going to get a little bit of leak out. The more you use an impact wrench, you're going to get some of that grease that's going to make its way out of these heads, so they need to be replaced. But pretty simple mechanism. I got to tell you, for this Kobalt, for as cheap as it is, they have some very decently made gears here. So all metal, we don't see any plastic in there. So there you have it, the Kobalt right angle impact wrench, the M12 FUEL ratchet. That's the difference between an impact, right angle impact wrench, and your typical cordless ratchet. Even though the battery powered ratchet and the battery powered impact wrench remove and install fasteners, they do it in two totally different manners, or in two different types of operations. One uses that impact mechanism, that hammering type of motion, and the other just uses a turning motion like you would with your regular ratchet. So obviously the impact wrench is going to deliver more power without any input. In fact, if you take a right angle impact, you really can't give any input. If you've ever noticed that, use your right angle impact and go to put some force on it, you're not doing anything. The only force it's driving is from the impact mechanism itself. Whereas on the battery powered ratchet, you can give it input. You can use it just like a regular ratchet. But if you'll look at what the manufacturer requires or recommends, they recommend that you don't put too much force on them as to, cracking the body, if you will. We've reviewed both of these tools before. We'll put the links in the description. Also, would you mind keeping track of us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter? And if you like this video, would you hit that like and subscribe button, but only if you liked it. If you didn't like the video, by all means, then give us that thumbs down. But would you let us know in the comments why? Have a great day and keep smiling.